Is humor compatible with religion? Or should religion be entirely humorless? Is light-heartedness compatible with spirituality? Or should spiritual people always look very serious? This is the question that I propose to deal with in this video, and the specific context in which I'm undertaking this investigation is, as far as Kerala is concerned, a bishop for whom I had boundless admiration, who is now no more. He was the supreme head of the Marthoma Church. I'm sure everybody remembers his name and remembers his name with much affection and appreciation. Philippos Marcus Sostum Vellitirumeni. I don't think any other Malayali was endowed with a sense of humor to the extent that Tirumeni was. And even though the Marthomites were proud of his sense of humor and therefore affectionately and with a degree of legitimate pride used to call him the king of humor, uh, I don't think that his church really appreciated the spiritual significance of his sense of humor. Anyway, I don't want to deal with that particular aspect. Let me stay focused on this one question. What, if any, is the harmony between humor and spirituality? This is the question. Let us begin our inquiry by noting something very interesting. What is interesting is that we don't find Jesus Christ of Nazareth as depicted in the four Gospels a man of extreme seriousness. In fact, he himself said, "The Son of Man came eating and drinking," and they called him a friend of sinners. John the Baptist came without eating and drinking. He was an embodiment of asceticism, and they said he had a demon. When the Son of Man came eating and drinking, they said he is a friend of the sinners. So either way, you're damned. So it's very clear that Jesus had a sense of humor, and he did not always wear the funeral look that people associate with extreme spiritual solemnity. And the reason for this is very simple. Jesus looked at everything through the medium of life. Life is not all grimness. Life is not holding your facial muscles tight and banishing moments of lightheartedness from your life. Life is at once light and darkness, laughter and tears, high and low, and all the rest of it. Now, in contrast to Jesus Christ, the Pharisees were always very serious, extremely serious. In fact, the Pharisees were serious to the point of being inflammable. And I'm afraid it was because the Pharisees were so deficient in humor that they were so ready to kill. The religious authorities of the times would not have conspired against Jesus Christ and killed him if they had a sense of humor. So, the theme that I'm dealing with has very, very profound significance, though it may not be so obvious on the surface of it. So, let's look at this issue. First thing to remember is that Jesus did not scorn humor, and Jesus did not think that being free in the spirit was incompatible with spiritual integrity. In fact, he said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you turn back and become like children, you shall in no wise enter the kingdom of God." And who among us does not know that children are very happy to laugh? In fact, one of the most beautiful sights, one of the beautiful things you can ever see in this world is that of an infant smiling in sleep. I can't think of anything more beautiful than that. So, why does an infant smile? Why do children love to laugh? If you leave children to themselves, you will find them laughing their hearts out. And you also find old people somewhat inclined to laughter. But in between, the active adult life somehow thinks of humor as somewhat out of bounds. Again, this is something strange. Let me also now draw your attention to something even more interesting. Even those who insist that religion is such a serious business and lightheartedness must be excluded from it, certainly prefer to have jokes in sermons. Who are the most popular preachers in Kerala? Those who try to incorporate funny jokes not of their making. Many of the people who go around sharing these funny episodes with people via sermons are people who have no sense of humor themselves. They thrive on the humor of other people. So, we're all very serious as far as religion is concerned, but we cannot enjoy a sermon unless it is plentifully sprinkled with jokes. Now, this again is something that I find rather interesting. Now, one of the authors who influenced me a lot as far as the sense of style is concerned in prose writing. To me, the most enjoyable prose writer in the English language is an author called G.K. Chesterton. G.K. Chesterton. I have read, I think, all his works, and many of them, so many of them, with tremendous interest. And I remember reading in one of his books that the religion of the future will have humor. He says, sanctified humor as its main hallmark. G.K. Chesterton. Now, let me also read a few lines from Chesterton. He says, life is serious all the time, but living cannot be. If you have to live without humor, as Mahatma Gandhi said, you will go mad. So, life is serious all the time, but living cannot be. You may have all the solemnity you wish in choosing your neckties, but anything important, such as death, sex, and religion, you must have mirth or you will have madness. So, as far as the more fundamental and more profound aspects of life are concerned, the choice is between mirth and madness. That's typical Chesterton. The choice is between mirth and madness. All right? So, it's as important as that. Now, I don't know if you have caught this, but if you look at the temptations of Jesus Christ, the temptation that Satan presented him with, you can actually catch a subtle strain of humor. Jesus used his very subtle but chiseled sense of humor as a defensive weapon against Satan. Now, this is not the time for me to undertake a detailed analysis of the three temptations to demonstrate how exactly Jesus uses a sense of humor. But I certainly must point out here that an important aspect of humor, or the very fountain spring of humor, is the ability to look at a situation from an angle which is different to that which is prevalent. If you are completely adapted to the prevailing assumptions and notions, then you will become completely humorless. On the other hand, if you can step out of this framework and look at the given situation from a perspective which is different from that which is now well entrenched in the present, then you will find the whole situation very funny. And to that extent, the sense of humor actually embodies a person's inner freedom. So, if you are free, in fact, humor is one of the major mediums through which you express your inner freedom. So, a person who is humorless is completely domesticated within the existing stereotypes, notions, presumptions, assumptions, and he cannot think differently to what is being talked about, assumed, and prescribed by everybody else. So, if you are a slave of the times, then you will lack a sense of humor. So, to that extent, your capacity for humor denotes the degree of your freedom from subjugation to the spirit of the times. Now, let me give an illustration from the life of Chrysostom Tirumeni. You and I clearly remember his 100th birth anniversary. Not many people have that special privilege. 100th anniversary. It was a major function, and people from all walks of life, including ministers, leading political figures, and so on and so forth, besides the religious bigwigs, all were in attendance. Many people made big speeches and all that. And finally, at the end of it all, when the microphone was given to Chrysostom Tirumeni, all that he said was that people did not realize that for 100 years he was making a fool of all of them. Now, to be able to say that, Chrysostom Tirumeni must be completely free from the particular tone and the mood and the assumptions with which that particular situation is filled. So he rises above the situation and demonstrates his spiritual or inner freedom. He could not contain Chrysostom Tirumeni within the small elbow rooms that people prescribed for him. And I found that particularly liberating. That's the reason why I got very attached to him. So, uh, let me give you another illustration. And this is something that he said from the podium in Maraman Convention. When Chrysostom Tirumeni was undergoing treatment for a particular kind of mild kind of curable kind of cancer, obviously he was subjected to chemotherapy, and this news spread far and wide, as indeed it would among Marthoma circles. And a Marthomite who was an ardent admirer of Tirumeni rang up from America and then asked him, Tirumeni, I hear that you are undergoing chemotherapy. Is that right? Tirumeni said, yes, yes. So these things happen. So then he said, you know, Tirumeni, I know what chemotherapy means. You will lose all your hair, and uh, it will cause a lot of devastation. Tirumeni made light of it. Then the man said, according to Tirumeni's own report, Tirumeni, even if you lose your head, you should not lose your beard. Now that is, Tirumeni is able to look at that situation from outside the framework that the Marthomites create. No Marthomite would ever think of it. I don't think a Marthomite said that, but that's how he looks at his own situation. And therefore, I want to underline my conviction that humor is the best, purest form of expressing your inner freedom, and particularly the humor in which you laugh at yourself. The second point I want to make is, again from the life of Jesus Christ, humor is the best weapon against hypocrisy. Jesus had the courage and clarity to see through the hypocrisy of the religious functionaries of the times because he had the spirit of humor in him. Suppose he was as pious as everybody else. Do you think he would have called the priests of the times whited sepulchres? Actually, if you look at that expression, and if you can see it with the eye of your mind, your imagination, you will find a lot of humor in it. Think of the whited sepulchre. Outside it's all immaculate, blemishless white. Inside it's all rotting. See, that monstrous contradiction can actually trigger laughter, right? Again, if you're not a slave of religion. So, even your ability to see through the hypocrisy of the religious establishment takes a little bit of humor. And maybe that's the reason why the custodians of religion are dead set against humor. Now, the third thing I want to say is that laughter is quintessentially human. You don't see animals laughing, do you? You don't see birds laughing. Well, you may say the chimpanzee may seem to be laughing, but we really do not know if they are laughing. But human laughter is of a piece by itself. There is nothing like that anywhere in the world. So, laughter is very, very human. For example, you don't laugh with an enemy, do you? You don't. You can't. And also, you don't laugh at any of your friends. So there is a very fine gradation in laughter. Laughter can be used as a weapon. You laugh at your enemy and you laugh with your friends. So laughter can be an experience of solidarity, a social freedom, a sense of feeling at home with somebody you can't crack a joke with, nor can you enjoy a joke with somebody with whom you feel uncomfortable. So if you're able to crack a joke, if you're able to enjoy a joke in the presence of somebody, it means that you have a spiritual vibration with him. I have a friend of mine in Trivandrum. Maybe I should reveal his name. His name is uh, George Behanan. We were classmates, we were batchmates, college mates in Bishop Moore College. And the moment I meet him or he meets me, laughter begins. And laughter ends only when we part. Because something triggers. It's a measure of the sense of oneness we have in spirit. So that's why I'm saying laughter is very human. And it's also an expression of your inner freedom, and it's certainly an unmistakable sign of social harmony and personal at oneness with others. Now, humor pertains to the profound. I don't know if you have realized this. You have to have an intuition of the profound to be genuinely humorous. By the way, not everything is humorous. In Malayalam, there is a word called Valipa, for which the English equivalent would be slapstick humor, very vulgar, coarse, uh, uh, uncivilized, uncultured humor. That doesn't take much of profundity. In fact, it takes vulgarity. I'm not talking about that. That's not my idea of humor. Humor, in my opinion, is very profound. It pertains to the profound. And anything which is profound is not far away from humor. Now, let me here take the help of a philosopher to prove my point. This is the philosopher who influenced me a great deal when I was a young man in my early 20s, Soren Kierkegaard. I remember reading in one of his books that the crucifixion is profoundly funny. You would be shocked when I quote from Kierkegaard that the crucifixion is funny. Why did Kierkegaard say so? Because he said the crucifixion is the funny spectacle of mortals trying to kill the immortal. I repeat exactly the words of Kierkegaard. The crucifixion is a funny spectacle of mortals trying to kill the immortal. So, therefore, the crucifixion is funny. The resurrection is also funny. In fact, the funny aspect of crucifixion becomes all the more evident via crucifixion, via resurrection. And resurrection exposes the unwitting, unwittingly funny aspect of the great exertions undertaken by the religious leaders of the times who thought they could cure their headache by getting this man out of their way. And certainly, Jesus looks at it from that perspective as well. And otherwise, he wouldn't have said, Father, forgive, for they know not what they do. So, if Jesus understands that they're doing something and they're doing with extreme gravity, and from Jesus' perspective, they are doing what they do not know, actually, it's a situation that can generate a lot of humor if you really think of it. So, there is a touch of humor both in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and in his resurrection. Therefore, the shallow and the silly cannot generate humor. And the shallow people, they may be capable of this kind of crude slapstick, but they'll not be capable of this kind of sanctified humor that G.K. Chesterton said must be the main characteristic of the religion of the future. Now, if you have read John Milton's epic poem, Paradise Lost, you will certainly agree with me that one of the things that Milton's Satan lacks is a sense of humor. Satan has no sense of humor. And you can come to many inferences from that. I will not really indulge in that at this point in time. So, Satan has no sense of humor. He's always serious. He's dead earnest. Absolutely serious. The fourth point I want to make is that humor is a mirror. Mirror held up to the taste of the times. If you really want to see how depraved, how cheap, how low, how vulgar the cultural taste of a society is, all you have to do is look at the kind of humor that's being generated. I said it's not humor in the proper sense of the term, it is crude slapstick, which should not be given the honorable name of humor. But you will see that people who cannot think, people who have no intuition about life, people who have no respect for life, people who are far away from what is profound and what is deep about life, they will not be capable of humor in the right sense of the term. And whatever they think is funny would be vulgar, obscene, and something that is way below human dignity. Sigmund Freud, who has a book on this, it's called Wit and its Relation to the Unconscious, points out that wit is a sign of admirable intellectual development. Wit, there is a capacity to generate wit. It's not the capacity to learn some jokes by heart and repeat it here, there, and everywhere and earn cheap applause from people. Genuine, original wit, the kind of wit that uh, Metropolitan Philippos Mark Chrysostom had. It bespeaks of a high order of intellectual development. Therefore, I'm not surprised that people who are underdeveloped, their intellectual capacity and their ability to look into the deeper aspects of life, are incapable of humor, and they even think of humor as impious or devilish, whereas, as I pointed out, the hallmark of Satan is that he is dead earnest, he is utterly incapable of humor. Now, uh, therefore, what I want to suggest to you is that we have to actually develop a theology of humor. Now, Jesus certainly had a sense of humor, but his sense of humor, if you want to appreciate his sense of humor, you have to develop a very high taste, a very high idea of, and a subtle sense of humor. If you approach this topic with a broad, vulgar, culturally depraved idea of slapstick humor, then you don't find it at all. Let me give you an illustration. When Jesus said to his disciples and the people who are listening to him, do as the Pharisees tell you, but don't do as they do. Now, that's profoundly humorous. Now, instead of saying the Pharisees are hypocrites, they contradict with their deeds what they say with their mouths. Says, do as they ask you to do, but don't do as they do. Now, that is typical of Jesus' sense of humor. I also catch a touch of humor when Jesus says, in my Father's house there are mansions, because knowing Christians as I do, and how unable they are to live peaceably together, it is highly essential that there are many mansions. Otherwise, you can imagine if all these Christians are allowed to come in and they have to live closely together, what will happen? And hell will have to look very different if that happens. And therefore, in order to avert a calamity, Jesus says, in my Father's house there are many mansions. We do not know how many mansions, certainly enough and more mansions so that we don't run into each other. So, therefore, a sense of humor is very important. Do not go around wearing a funeral look all the time. Heavens are not going to fall if you are light-hearted a little bit, if you laugh a little bit, if you look at the funnier side a little bit. Please remember that truth and humor are cousins. They're close to each other. I'll close on that and give you an illustration, a familiar illustration, a famous illustration. Illustration from children's classics. You're familiar with the name of Andersen's Tales, and in particular, that most famous of all his tales, The Emperor is Naked. Only a child who had the freedom to tell the truth dared to say, to exclaim, the emperor is naked, which of course will activate profound laughter. Till then, it was such a grim and serious occasion. Everybody was constrained to tell what was completely untrue, manifestly untrue. But a little child who had the freedom to tell the truth punctures the bubble of all this make believe. And you can imagine hundreds and thousands of people bursting into rip-roarious laughter. That's why I say humor and truth go hand in hand. Whereas, if you embrace falsehood and if you assume that life is one long, grim look, or you project that utter nonsense onto God and think that God will be angry, upset. God's composure will be lost if you laugh, or if you look at the lighter side of life, which Jesus himself did, then I think you need to think again. Laughter is God's gift, but it must have its season and its reason. A joke cracked out of context is extremely embarrassing, and nothing is more embarrassing than a failed joke, as you know. Even blasphemy can be tolerated, but not a failed joke is extremely embarrassing. So everything has its reason and its season, but in its place, humor can actually solve many situations. Humor can make people relax. I have gone through many situations which seemed very explosive, confrontations developing between two parties, sparks are beginning to fly, and you don't know any time you can break out into skirmish, fisticuff, etc. At that point in time, if using your sanctified sense of humor, you can uh, highlight the funny side of it and make the two contesting parties laugh, that's the end of it. That's the end of it. The situation will be diffused. So it has multiple facets. I have not presented everything about humor, and I have included something in this video just to get you going after it. One of the most interesting subjects to investigate is humor. And one of the greatest gifts to cultivate is also a sense of humor. I strongly recommend the sense of humor to you and close my humble presentation on that feeble recommendation. All the very best.